Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail, where you can, in turn, inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we are able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson, and today we're going to share a story about how running hurts sometimes, but we'll also discuss why that's a good thing. And then I'm going to talk about an experience that I had when I was living below the Gnat line. And what does that have to do with becoming a better runner? Well, keep listening and you'll find out. And joining me for all of that and more is Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is early.
Yeah, we're here early.
Every once in a while we have to do these things very early because of scheduling things. And I don't know, my coffee hadn't kicked in yet. So maybe everybody listening will get to witness my coffee kicking in this morning.
Yeah, that might be interesting. Watch you come alive just in real time.
Like a flower blooming, maybe. I don't think it'll be that.
Well, we're recording this just before daylight savings time ends, and so we get an extra hour of sleep, but then it gets dark early. So we were talking this week and yesterday, and somebody was saying it was a great thing that daylight savings time was ending, and I'm like, no, it's a terrible thing. And of course, they were talking about the hour of sleep, and I was talking about the lack of the
it's kind of like the seasons where we live. I love the variety. You know, some people don't have, is it daylight savings time, or they don't have daylight savings times in some places, do they?
Right.
Some states. But I like the changes. You know, I don't necessarily like that it gets darker earlier, but I like that it's getting daylight earlier, because right now it's almost 7:45 before it gets good daylight outside. So that's kind of a bummer. But
that's true.
But yeah, Thanksgiving's coming up pretty quick. Do you got any Thanksgiving traditions that your family does?
No, I used to with my mother when she was alive. Yeah. But now we don't do a whole lot on Thanksgiving.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason we don't do a whole lot is because we always did something I left that day for my mother, whatever she wanted to do. And so now Debbie and I, we just kind of hang out on Thanksgiving.
Time for a new tradition.
And I don't like turkey. So
really,
I don't eat turkey on Thanksgiving. So I know I'm the oddball, and I know maybe even that's blasphemous to say it, but that's how I am.
Well, we're always down at, Holly's parents live down on the beach in Florida.
You guys have a great tradition.
We have a week-long thing, but probably my favorite part of Thanksgiving is actually not Thanksgiving. It's Friday after Thanksgiving, and it's not because of Black Friday. We always go out fishing, and we come back, and this little town in Florida called Apalachicola. Try to say that 10 times real fast. But in Apalachicola, the Friday after Thanksgiving at like 5:30 in the evening, right as it's starting to get dark, Santa Claus comes in on a shrimp boat, and it's the coolest thing. I mean, it's just it's a really small town, and I don't know. I love those kind of small town traditions like that. So we're excited to get back down there.
Cool. Is your Christmas tree up yet?
Of course it is, Dean. Of course it is. So I probably broke all kind of laws as early as I put it up this year.
Probably.
At least social laws, but I don't care. The haters can hate. I love having the Christmas tree up. So, well, let's move on. Let's talk about this week's sponsor again. If you are a business out there and you want to support what Run for God does and allow us to support you in the process, give us an email. Shoot us an email at runlanehollis@gmail.com. We'll get you all the information on how you can be part of that. And it's a good partnership, just like our good partnership with Casey Carpenter here. Gathered Goods is our partner for this week. Gathered Goods is a special kind of produce market. It only happens a handful of times per year, ran by Casey Carpenter, a household name right here in Dalton. They provide the freshest produce shipped in just days before the sale, sometimes even the day of. The variety of goods they bring is just unreal. It really is a great organization, so be on the lookout for the next produce run by Gathered goods, it's worth every penny. And it is. Casey does a great job of hyping that time up. He does a lot for the farmers of Georgia, really.
Yeah.
He goes around the state and really handpicks who he's going to make part of this, and they bring it in by the transfer truckload. It's really amazing what he pulls off in that period of just a few days. Thousands and thousands of boxes of produce. So go check it out.
It's nice for a plant-based eater like me. See, I do more for the farmers than you do.
No. People have to farm cattle. And chickens.
That's
There's
true.
Plenty. I mean, don't hate on the chicken farmers, Dean. The beef farmers.
That's true.
But yeah, great organization. Go check them out. Gathered Goods. You can find them on. You can Google them at Gathered Goods, and great organization.
Very good. Well, let's talk about the Run Club social post we had from last week that I liked. This one comes from Alice Rhines, and this was our questions. What to do questions she posts. My next race will also be at higher elevations with more hills, so wondering what to do over the next 12 weeks. 2 things I'm planning. 1, adding calf raises to my strength routine, and 2, at least every other Saturday do the long run as a bridge repeaters, since that is the only type of hill I have. To prepare for this last race, my long run always had a bridge that I had to go over out and back, but it wasn't enough. Any other ideas? My ferritin levels are just above the baseline for normal, so my doc does have me taking supplements for that, but I just started, and I believe that will help with the slogging through mud-weighted leg feeling. I think there's 2 important things here, and this, she sent this out, and I responded to this, and you may have seen that if you're regular on Run Club Social, you may have seen my response to this, but here's the thing. Hills are hard.
Let's just go ahead and get that fact out of the way.
Yes, they are. And so I think people are looking for this thing to make hills feel like the rest of their run.
Yeah.
That can't happen. It doesn't matter.
It shouldn't happen.
Right. And I've run 100,000 miles plus.
Yeah.
And hills are still very hard for me.
Sure.
And so the idea that you're going to figure out a way to make hills feel like the rest of your run. I don't want to say easy, because even just running on flat ground is not necessarily easy, but you're not going to get there. You're never going to get there. Now, some people are better at hills than others. Some people do have an easier time going up hills. I'm not one of those. I struggle with hills to this day. I've always struggled with hills. Again, with all the miles I've run, I'm never going to be a good hill runner. I just have to accept it. And I've learned to run really well down hills. So, maybe that's something you can work on to make up for the struggle up the hill.
And some people struggle with running downhill. There's people that are better at it than others.
Absolutely.
Ironically enough. So
100%. I've been in races with people that are good uphill, poor downhill runners, and it's interesting.
Well, you've talked about some races on here where you gained on people on the downhills because they got you on the uphills, but you got them on the downhills.
Yeah, so. It happens. Happens all the time. So, yeah, listen, I understand why you hate hills. I guarantee you I understand it. And the other issue she talked about here was her ferritin level. Here's my thoughts, and I'm not a doctor. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not
get that out there.
Yes, and I'm not telling you what to do. But in my experience, if you've ever been diagnosed with a low iron level in any way, it does not hurt to take an iron supplement daily.
Right.
You don't take a ton. You don't take a whole bunch of iron, but take a little bit of iron every day. And I just find that that's a good idea to just do it and make it a habit and just keep doing it from now till forever.
Yeah, and one other thing that we've also found out about iron through the years is, when you go to the doctor's office and they give you a kind of a baseline chart, your iron should be between this and this. Oftentimes the chart they're showing you, the what they call the normal side can actually be a little bit low, because the more active you are, the more iron you actually need. So, I think I've heard people say that they're in the normal level when they're, above 35 or something like that. Well, I've done some research, and we went through that whole thing with Lane, and I've always been told that if it's below 40, as an endurance athlete, you're on the low side. It doesn't hurt to get up, 80, 90, 100. You have to get really high for it to start to get dangerous. But with that said, I'm not a doctor. You're
Right.
not a doctor. So go check it out. If you got questions on it, you can go to the runforgodblog.com and pull up, just type in iron. And I think we did a blog on there about the thing about iron.
Yeah.
It's a good read. So yeah, it's a interesting topic.
Absolutely. I take iron every day. I was anemic back in 1988. And
I didn't know that.
yes, well, it was when I graduated from college, because my diet was so poor when I was in college, because I got through college debt free, and the way I got through college debt free was
Your nutrition suffered.
yes, it did, but I was glad that I did.
Sure.
And I learned something. And so now I know that if my body has the potential to have low iron, then I just take iron.
Yeah.
And I think it's good for me. All right, we had a trivia question for last week, and it was this: running on the treadmill requires less energy than running outside. What is it about running outside that makes it more difficult than running on a treadmill? You knew the answer to this one, didn't you?
Well, yes, but I would have put something else in front of it. So I think we can argue about which one, but go ahead and I'll tell you what I thought.
There are a couple of things there. Wind resistance.
Yeah,
they say
that's probably the number one.
Is the number one thing is that wind resistance is the number one thing that makes running outdoors tougher than running indoors on a treadmill. And since we're going into winter, and in some parts of the country it's already really cold, a lot of people have to spend more time on a treadmill, or choose to. Listen, I don't like treadmills. I avoid them at all costs. You and I both run some long runs on some treadmills.
Yeah.
You much longer than I have.
Yeah.
But I picked up this information. This comes from Healthline, if you want a reference, about treadmill running and versus outdoor running, and I thought this was interesting. So, treadmill running, pros to treadmill running. It's one of the biggest advantages of using a treadmill is its accessibility. Most treadmills are indoors, so you can use it day or night. You can use it in any climate. It just makes with the weather and the darkness. A lot of people don't like to run in the dark as well. It makes running a little bit easier from that standpoint. And of course, treadmills have a lot of different functions. You can control the speed precisely. There's some of them have workouts built into them, interval training and other things, and that's an interesting thing. It provides a little bit of variety, and that's something that's cool about treadmills. It's also good for people who are returning from an injury. So if you've had a minor injury, a lot of times treadmills can help you creep back into running in an easier way, in a better way. One of the things about treadmills is that they are softer than running on the road or a sidewalk, and so they're better on your joints and things like that. And that those are the good things about treadmills. Well, there's some cons about treadmills too. Obviously, the biggest one, the one for me, is there's no scenery. Now, some treadmills have like little screens on them where you can watch stuff and things like that. That's just not enough for me.
Not the same.
It's not, and I don't know why. That doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah,
I've tried it, but you're never going to have as much fun with what you're looking at on a treadmill. And then there's a study that shows. More than one study actually, but some that show there's not an impact, and some that show that there is, that you don't use as many muscles when you run on a treadmill.
Well, that was going to be my point. Is terrain undulations. Yeah, I mean, you when you're running outside, I don't know if there's a study that proves it, but I would think there has to be a study that shows you're using your core. I mean, you're using so many things because you're constantly. It could be a sidewalk, and you're constantly watching your footing, and even the smallest little ups and downs of a sidewalk, you're engaging a lot more muscles. That's why I think that was my number one reason for running outside, especially if you get off the road and on a trail or something like that. But it's just terrain. That's because nothing's completely flat, even on a track. Yeah, you're having to watch your footing to some degree. In a treadmill, you can really kind of just zone out. That was my probably my
I would
number
argue
one.
you have to worry about running off the treadmill too.
Well, that comes to a coordination thing.
Yeah. As I get older, that becomes more.
That
and more
is
difficult.
you being the problem, not the terrain being the problem. And yes, I've done it before, so I'm not throwing stones at you.
Well, there is some validity. There's definitely a lot of validity to what you're saying, for sure. If you want the extra work of having to keep balance and things like that, then certainly running outdoors. It's one of the best things about running on trails is that it is good for your core and other things. So it's why I run on trails, because I hate running on trails. But if you follow me on Strava, you'll see that I'm on trails fairly regularly, and I do that because I want to help my core.
So I think we've talked about it on here. I'm going to throw and the leaves are probably already gone for most everybody listening, but I did the Hagmill Lake loop this past weekend. Did 2 loops of it. It's dangerous this time of year.
The rocks.
The rocks that are covered by leaves.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I about hit the ground, but yeah, I got my core workout in that day for sure. So
for sure.
Beware if you're running on trails in the fall, because those leaves, there's some things that jump up and bite you, and it's not a snake.
It makes a big difference. Big difference. And some people say that your stride is shorter when you're on a treadmill, and that now there's some studies that show that's not true. I think it just depends on how relaxed you are when you're on a treadmill. Personally, that's my feeling. And then, of course, one of the downsides of a treadmill is the cost. Obviously, you have to have a treadmill or access to a treadmill, and that may carry with it a cost to join a gym or to buy your own treadmill. And so, those are and then for outdoor running, the pros of outdoor running obviously are, the fresh air, the changing scenery, again, like you said, the uneven ground, and of course, unlimited options for routes is one of my favorite things. So, both treadmill and outdoor running bring health benefits such as lower blood pressure, greater endurance, and lower risk of depression. But outdoor running may give additional benefits simply by helping you feel more connected to nature, which I think is interesting, and I think it's true. And then there's a 2016 study that found that spending at least 30 minutes per week around outdoor greenery, such as parks and forests, could reduce rates of depression by 7% and high blood pressure by 9%. So there's some good reasons to be out in nature, whatever you're doing. And again, all of this goes to walking as well as running.
Does the high blood pressure go to because it reduces stress? I mean, just getting outside, being cooped up in an office all day. I know when I stare at my computer all day and working, I can feel my body I can almost feel my blood pressure going down, the stress going down, just going outside and even just walking up and down the roads.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. And then, of course, we just mentioned about just dodging people. If you run in a city, especially up and down off of curbs and people, and all of that provides a little bit extra for you. If you're running outdoors as well and you're running on firmer surfaces, it also shows that that's good for our bones. We feel like it's bad for our joints, but it's also good for them at the same time.
You're building bone
with
impact.
For sure. So that's good. So. And then, of course, running outdoors free, and that's a good thing. So, and then the cons of running outdoors, obviously, weather. That's one of the things. Weather changes. Now, I enjoy.
I was going to say it's all about your mentality there.
It is.
State of mind.
But there's certainly some risk to running in rain and snow and icy situations, and extreme hot or cold temperatures can be risky. But normally with the right clothing, you can do just about anything, anywhere, anytime. So
the risk of doing nothing is much greater.
Absolutely, for sure. Running at night, obviously, it can be dangerous depending on where you are.
You run a lot at night still?
I don't. I rarely run.
I don't know the last time I ran at night.
Yeah,
I used to do it quite a bit, but I don't anymore. I don't know why that is.
Yeah,
I guess because I'm getting older and I like to go to bed early, so maybe that's what it is.
I think that's my thing too. Yeah. But if you do run at night, make sure you wear reflective gear. Just want to say that out front. And find somebody to run with.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing, when you're outdoors, if you're running with somebody, it's always a whole lot safer for just a bevy of reasons.
So yesterday, you and I and Gay and Shannon and Debbie and Holly, we all went to a funeral for one of our friends' parents. And so I've been telling you, I've been running with Keith Parham. And so yesterday I had to run early so I could get back and get home, get ready to go to that funeral. And so I ran by myself. It was the worst run I've had in a while. I don't know. I don't know if it was just a bad day or what, but it was one of those runs you're just like, I just need to do this over tomorrow. Yeah. I finished it, but still, I mean, you get used to running with somebody. It's a challenge to run without somebody. So yeah.
Well,
anyway,
that's my typical. So
yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the Couch Marathon. It's coming up. You know, we're looking at January on starting Couch to Marathon 2023. We've already had quite a few people sign up for it. They've took the plunge. We've had some people already sign up to teach and coach in their communities the Couch to Marathon alongside us. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think so.
It's been fun this year. It seems like it gets better and better every year. We are going to have a new location for the marathon graduation. More details on that to come. We're working out the details of that. But yeah, if you're out there and you've been sitting on the sidelines, maybe you're part of Run Club and you've never run over a 5K, and a marathon is in the back of your mind. I think if anybody's ever run a 5K, a marathon is back there somewhere. It's in the back of your mind. Take the plunge.
Shoot, yeah.
Take the plunge. I mean, if you decide a quarter way through it, you're just going to go to the half marathon, then great. But push yourself outside your comfort zone a little bit. We all know what happens when we get outside our comfort zone. Yep. We grow. That's where true growth happens. So I know there's a lot of people listening, and I know there's a lot of people listening who think maybe next year. Well, next year is almost upon us at this point. That's so right. Go to runforgod.com. We've got a yellow banner at the top of the screen that's a link to the Couch to Marathon 2023. We have the whole playbook that you can download, all the information. If you're a person that needs all the information like me, then that PDF download will give you, it's a great read for people that like the details. So go to runforgod.com, click on the yellow banner on the homepage, and go check it out.
Yep.
Social media?
Nope.
Grocery store tabloids?
Nope.
The newspaper?
Not usually.
The national news?
Are you serious?
Is there any media source these days that only shares a positive message? A lot of the media we take in each day can be pretty negative. Why not make the decision right now that your music will only be positive? Sign up for an account at jradio.com today and download the app in your app store with music for every moment and entirely positive Christian message. It'll be nice to hear things going right for a change.
As always, we are sponsored by J Radio, so if you haven't checked them out yet, check them out. You know, this podcast wouldn't be available if it weren't for the folks at J Radio. They do a great job working with us, and you know, even if you decide not to do anything with it, just check it out. Just check it out and see what you think. And don't forget that on Thursday nights we meet kind of virtually. Come up with a topic this week. Our topic this week is very interesting. It will have been done by the time it comes up, but we're going to talk about Mike Rowe's sweat pledge this Thursday.
I saw the topic you sent to me, but I didn't know that was Mike Rowe.
Yeah, so by the time this comes out, we will have already done that, but I think you'll find that interesting.
Now let's make an announcement right here. If you're in Run Club, you probably already know this by this point, but going forward, we are doing the Thursday night lives on the Facebook group. We knew this was going to be a challenge when we started the new site. We've kind of split the team up a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the Facebook Live, or the Thursday Night Live will be on the Run Club Facebook group. And the reason for that is we want everybody in one place. You know, we want comments and all that to be in one place. You do a great job of addressing the comments, and when you split them up, it's a little bit difficult to see all the comments. And then, but the great thing about the new runforgod.com is that all of those are automatically archived. So as soon as you're done, it archives it, and you can go to runforgod.com and go to the Run Club Live or the Thursday Night Live and pull up all the archives. So if you missed last week for whatever reason, you can go to runforgod.com, make sure you're logged in, obviously, and go to the archives, and all the information is right there. All the videos are there. So it's a great place we can have the live on Facebook, and then we can have the archives for playback anytime. You may want to play them in front of your class, but all that is on the member side of runforgod.com.
That'll be good, because it's always been an issue, folks trying to find an old Thursday Night Live session, and now it'll be easier. Well, what do you think about weightlifting for runners? Beneficial, not beneficial?
I think it's anything you do to improve your fitness is good. Yeah. Obviously with moderation. Yeah. But yeah, I think weightlifting is great for runners.
Well, and it becomes more important as we get older.
Sure.
Too. The older we are, the more our muscles atrophy, and we
just naturally lose muscle as you get older.
And so it becomes more important as we get older, and I think we lose sight of that sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling with it. I'm not a big fan of strength training, so I have to force myself to do it. And
now, with that said, I think you can do most everything you need to do with body weight. It doesn't have to be weights.
That's
That's kind of what I prescribe to. You got people like Nick Bear. Have you seen him recently?
I haven't.
He posted a picture. It's a guy that Lane follows. He's kind of a bodybuilder, but he's also a very fast runner. He's ran Boston. He's kind of challenged the conventional wisdom that people who lift a lot of weight can't be runners. Yeah. And he's kind of challenged that. But he has went through this. Like a 60-pound, he's one of those that bulks up and then drops back down, which I don't know if that's healthy. I don't know. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm saying I don't know if it is. But yeah, he's one of those guys that he can really lift a lot of weight and still run fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're out there.
Well, you got Ryan Hall too.
So. Yeah, that's true.
He's still running pretty fast.
Yeah. I had a guy who he owns a CrossFit gym who was telling me that I read a book called The Unbreakable Runner, mm-hmm. which talks about CrossFit and running and how the two go together well. And of course, he's claiming that you can run faster by doing CrossFit, and I completely disagree with that.
Yeah, that's completely wrong.
Yeah, but anyway, what about for walkers? You think strength training is good for walkers?
Again, I think doing anything to get yourself more fit is good. It's better than nothing.
And the variety's fun.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, we have a story this week from Sam Ridenauer, good friend of ours mm-hmm. from Carroll, Ohio. And this story is called, and this is an older story. We're needing some new stories. So this is an older one. This one's called Scratching the Surface. In my mid-20s, I was bitten by the running bug. Entering local 5K races just wasn't enough. I needed a goal, so after much looking, I found one that was difficult but attainable, the Boston Marathon. My dream was to be in the same race as many of the best runners in the world, and in order to start that race, I had to earn a qualifying time, or a BQ. A charity spot would not do. I desperately wanted that BQ, enough so that I vowed never to visit Boston until I qualified for the marathon. Over the next 2 years, I started running more, and after the first year, I ran my first marathon, but I still had to knock an hour off my time in order to qualify. My job as a high school teacher allowed me to take the summer and devote myself to training for the race. I even chose a marathon in Akron, Ohio, whose course profile mimicked Boston's. That summer of training was awesome. I began to see changes in my body. I began to feel like a real runner. I headed into that race quite confident that I would lower my PR by 20 to 25 minutes. Real progress toward that coveted BQ. The race started off well. The rolling hills in the beginning part of the race were easy to traverse. I had planned the race and was racing the plan to a T. I even crossed the halfway point about 2 minutes faster than my previous half marathon PR. Right on target. But then I reached a long hill from miles 17 through 19. It was tougher than I expected, and I wasn't feeling too great at the top, so I ate an energy gel, and everything went south in a hurry. I got sick to my stomach, and after another mile, I simply could not run anymore and had to start walking. The pain was excruciating, and all of the acid that had been building up in my legs flushed itself out all at once. The agony seemed to magnify by my being completely stripped of energy over the previous 20 miles. In the span of about 15 minutes, I had gone from feeling on top of the world to complete devastation. An entire season of training seemed to have been flushed down the drain. By the grace of God, I finished the race nearly 45 minutes slower than my previous marathon and nearly scaring my wife half out of her wits when I called her from a medical tent to let her know I was okay. I put on a happy face and told her I was glad to have finished, but inwardly, I was crushed. During the car ride home, the most amazing thing happened. As I was trying to fall asleep, I heard this voice in my mind clearly say, "That barely scratched the surface of what I went through for you." Wow. Even though I grew up in church, went to a Christian university, and was living life how I thought a young Christian man should, it was not until that moment that I began to understand the depth of God's love. Jesus, Son of God, took that moment of deep disappointment to speak to me. He knew how deeply that race mattered. Had I not gone through that awful race, I would not have understood what he was saying. He loved me enough to allow me to fail so that my heart would hear his words. I'm still awestruck every time I remember those words. Jesus desperately loves each and every one of us. Any pain that you experience, be it through training, injury, or life experience, barely scratches the surface of the pain that our Savior endured so that he could conquer sin and death once and for all.
That's a great story, Sam.
Yeah.
Sam went on to run. He's one of those ultra junkies now. He likes to run across countries and all kind of cool stuff. So
he'll tell you he's a sprinter, and so he's not a distance runner, but he's
it sure doesn't show by the races he signs up for.
Yeah, he's crazy. But we see this all the time, right? Good things coming out of bad circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's
you got to have the bad circumstances to learn the good things.
That's right. We just went through a couple of tough years with the whole COVID thing, and but even with COVID and as bad as it was, we had some good things that came out of it. We realized we don't have to meet in person for everything, and I think that's a good thing. Now, I like meeting in person, and I think we probably need to get back to doing a little bit more of that.
I'm so over cases. Zoom.
And I get
I'm so over. I will fly across the country to meet you if it can get me out of Zoom. I despise it now.
But we realize we can still get some things done doing that, and that was a good thing. Our kids, I think they were affected in some profound ways through schools and things like that. But I think we learned some things about what our kids were going through that has really helped. It's been good. It's been enlightening for us. I think parents are now more invested in their children's education than they were prior to this.
Right.
For some, the parents really appreciate the teachers a little bit more because they realize this is not that easy to make sure that the kids learn these things. Anyway, a lot of good things came from the bad circumstances. And we've all been through that bad race where when we thought we were going to have a good race and we go into it, and then it's a huge frustration, right? When we get through that race and we're like, all that work and look what just happened.
What is the going into a race? Because we've all had those races that Sam's talking about where you have this time in mind and then you finish with this time and it's not even close. What is the biggest gap that you've ever had where I'm going in and I'm going to run 250 and you finished? What is the biggest span between what you thought and reality at the end of the race?
Well, it depends on the length of the race.
Say marathon.
So for a marathon, trying to run 250 and running 3:11.
So 20 minutes, 21 minutes.
Yeah, 20 minutes. Yeah. I just completely fell. That was at the Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
And That was the time that I tried. We had the run at the mill, and then
I think I remember I was watching that on the live feed, the finish line, and we were like, "Where's Dean? Where's Dean?"
Yeah.
And then you could tell when you came through on the. If it's the one I'm thinking about, oh, he's hurting.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. I spent some time in the medical tent after that one.
Yeah.
That was a rough day, but it was a good experience for a lot of other reasons that we won't go into now. But to his point, that's probably that was my slowest marathon I ever ran. Well, that's not true. My slowest marathon was at the end of a triathlon. So, Psalm 22:24 says, "For he has not despised nor abandoned the affliction of the afflicted, nor has he hidden his face from him. But when he cried to him, he heard." Of course, that's a psalm from David, and David was facing his enemy. He was really troubled by the idea of facing his enemies. His enemy was right there, close by. But he also understood that no matter what his enemies were doing, and no matter how close they were, God was right there with him.
Right.
And he was thankful for that. And we should all recognize that God's always there, even in these times when. I'll tell you what, when that marathon that I ran in Boston didn't feel like anybody was there. It felt like it was just me and my pain.
Yeah.
But the truth is he's there, and all the time. And a lot of times we don't see it in the moment. I think that's the trick, is to try to figure out how to get there where you can see it in the moment. And
I think
default to
rarely
that.
you see it in the moment.
Yeah.
It's why we always talk about you've got to look back,
To me, it's how you know that your relationship with Christ is not fully matured.
Right.
Because that should be our default, right?
Well, I think we learn to know that God is in it in the moment, but very rarely do you see God's plan in the moment.
Well, that's true.
A lot of times it's always looking back, going, "Oh, that's what you were up to." Because I think just like David, God allows us to get to that point of kind of agonizing about things, and because he wants us to come to him and put our, that's often what brings us closer to God, is when we know he's there, but we don't know what he's up to.
Yeah.
And so it really draws us close because we want the answers.
Yeah.
And I just think that's all part of God's plan a lot of times.
Yeah, I think you're right. Hebrews 12:2. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Of course, that's the verse right after Hebrews 12:1, which is kind of our flagship verse. And I like this because it basically is saying he's the foundation. That's when it says he's the author of our faith. He is the foundation of our faith. It's what it's all about. Life, everything about life. And then it says he is the finisher. And to me, that means not only is he the foundation, he is all we need.
Yeah.
Once you have that, that's all you need. And I like the way that's put, the author and the finisher.
I like the New King James a little bit better. We've talked about it before, the perfecter of our faith, and it's an action. It's not a statement. It's a process.
Yeah.
When I read this morning, I thought about Landon and doing his woodworking, and sometimes when Landon is making this beautiful piece, whatever it is, I'm thinking of something he's got out there right now, and right now it looks horrible. It looks worse right now than when he started. Yeah. But he has this picture in his head, and he's perfecting that piece, and sometimes that means going through some ugly stages. But in the end, we know what Landon's capable of doing. Well, sometimes God brings us through some pretty ugly stages. That's why it's not our perfect faith. It's why it's the perfecter of our faith. Yeah. And sometimes that brings us in mud. Sometimes that brings us in agony and turmoil. But we know in the end, we know when we walk through the gates of heaven, it's going to be that beautiful piece of furniture, whatever Landon's doing out there. But Landon could not get to where he's trying to go without being at the stage that table is out there right now. It looks horrible. You think, man, Landon has really messed this thing up. But Landon's got the picture in his head, and he knows what he's doing. And right now he's perfecting it. He's the perfecter of that table. And I don't know why that illustration came to my mind this morning. I guess because I'm looking at what Lane is doing out there, and I'm like, I know what he's doing, but most people that would walk in would be, man, he's run this thing in the ditch.
What a mess.
But I don't know. It's just a great illustration for me that's exactly how God allows our lives to go sometimes. And it's necessary.
And to take it one step further, we're all a work of art to God.
Exactly.
And he has this unbelievable great plan for each of us, for that thing for us to be finished.
You know, I've told Holly this. If you've watched this podcast, I'm sitting here looking at it right here. So I kind of go in and out of a long beard.
Yeah.
And a beard is the same exact way. And I've never gotten past this point. I shave it when I get to this point. But with a beard, if you've ever grown a beard out there, you know that there comes a time where you get to that weird stage. And you just don't even need to touch it. You know, things are going every which way. But once you get past it, you get to that, everything kind of hangs down and it becomes very uniform. I've never been able to get past that weird state. I shave it. But it's just another example. Sometimes we have to go through the weird times.
Yeah.
We have to go through the ugly times. God brings us to the turmoil, but we know on the other side of it that things are good.
That's a cool illustration. Matthew 27:11 through 54. It's a long thing here, but I think this is good, especially this time of year. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said to him, "It is as you say." And while he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. Now at the feast the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, "Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" They said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" And they all said to him, "Let him be crucified." Then the governor said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, saying, "Let him be crucified." When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that the tumult was rising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, "I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it." And all the people answered and said, "His blood be on us and our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And when they had twisted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of Jews." And they spat on him. They took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they took the robe off him. They put his own clothes on him and led him away to be crucified. Now as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they had come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, place of the skull, they gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink. But when he had tasted it, he would not drink. Then they crucified him and divided his garments, casting lots, that they might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Sitting down, they kept watch over him there, and they put up over his head the accusation written against him. Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right hand and the other on the left. And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who destroyed the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." Likewise, the chief priests also, mocking with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others. Himself he cannot save. If he is the king of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, and if he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. Even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing. Now from the 6th hour until the 9th hour there was darkness all over the land, and about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani? That is, my God, why have thou forsaken me? Some of those who stood there when they heard that said, This man is calling for Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and offered it to him to drink. The rest said, Let him alone. Let us see if Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. So, when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly, saying, Truly, this was the Son of God.
It's hard to read.
It is. It is. And that's a picture of the resurrection. It really drives the point home with Sam, because you're thinking about the pain that he endured during that race. And I know what that pain feels like. I know exactly what he's talking about. And yeah, it's nothing compared with that scene.
Right. You know what really, and I've thought about this before, but it came to my mind again as you were reading that. What stands out most about the depiction or the picture of Jesus' crucifixion is that the governor asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus said, It is as you say. And then he remained silent.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the whole idea that Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Nowadays we feel like we say what we say yes or no, and we feel like we got to justify it, and we just keep talking and keep talking and keep talking. And Jesus really paints the picture here that your silence many times is the most convincing thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure. It is said that, do you not hear how many things testify against you? And he answered not one word. I can only imagine, because this governor, he didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
I think he felt it in the pit of his stomach. His wife was warning him. There was all these things telling him, don't do this. So that he probably did this over and over and over that day. Just take back what you said, Jesus. And Jesus was just very stoic and didn't say anything. And that's a lesson for me, because somebody accuses me of something, you want to make your case, and sometimes we need to say yes or no. No, I didn't say that, or yes, I said that, and then just remain silent, because we can become ineffective by trying to be effective.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just what kind of stood out to me the most about hearing this morning is Jesus' silence through this whole process.
Yeah, it makes me think of, and I don't want to get into politics, but the whole cancel culture thing and somebody being, canceled, for lack of a better term, that's what they call it. And then somebody feeling like they have to go through this big, long explanation. Mm-hmm. But in reality, the big, long explanation, whatever the apology is for something that you're really not sorry for, mm-hmm. in most cases, is not going to help the situation.
No.
And most of the time, it's better just to remain quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't think of. I thought about this story from this standpoint. If you asked me what's the most pain I've ever been in a race, I'm not sure that I could put my finger on one race. Right? I don't know that I could think of. I've had a few that were of note. Jesus doesn't have that problem. Jesus knows what the most painful time in his life was. There's no question about it. There's one point in time, and it way surpasses everything else. And I don't know why that struck me, that it was such a poignant thing that there's nothing that compares with it. There's nothing you can compare it to.
And I don't know if this is what you're saying or not, but to me, the pain was not the crucifixion. Well, when is the next time he spoke? When he was separated from God.
That's right.
Why have you forsaken me? To me, that was the most painful part of the whole thing. Was when, because God had to separate himself. God had to separate himself from the sin.
Yeah.
And Jesus knew that, and that was the most painful part of the whole thing, was being separated.
Yeah.
In that moment.
Wow. What is the worst suffering you've ever experienced as a runner?
Mine is the Albany Marathon.
Yeah.
That race will stand out in my mind forever. It was my one and only time that I tried to qualify for Boston. I was in the best shape of my life at the start of that race. I was in sub 312, sub 315 shape. I think I had to run 306 to get to Boston. It was when I was a little bit younger. Yeah. So the time was much faster, but very similar situation to Sam here. And it was actually my nutrition is what got me as well. Yeah. But that race, it was pouring at the start line. I mean, pouring. There were tornado sirens going off. We actually went to one aid station, and the volunteers were gone because there were tornado sirens going off. There was a lot of tornadoes in the southeast that day. And I had eaten something, or something got my stomach. Mine was about mile 10 or 11. And it was just, you know your goal is gone, and then it's just agony the rest of the time. And mine was, that's why I was asking, you said 21 minutes. Mine was probably, I don't even remember now. Mine was probably an hour and a half between what I thought I was going to do. Because I think it was like 4:40. It was over an hour and a half. 4:40, I think, is what I ran that race in. Yeah. And it was horrible. Wow. So, that race stands out to me.
Man. It's funny because when I think about this, what is the worst suffering you've ever experienced as a runner? I know this sounds crazy, but my mind immediately goes to races where I was successful and I hurt really bad. And so, there was one race in particular that comes to mind where there was a local guy that I'd been trying to beat for years, and I finally beat him that day. And I just remember how intensely it hurt finishing that race, because it was like, at that point I knew I was past, it was a 5K. I was past, I was ahead of him at 2 miles, and I was like, this is unfamiliar territory. I got to really hammer it home here. And I did, and it hurt so bad. Totally worth it, of course. Yeah. But I just, that one kind of sticks out on me. And then, of course, like I said, that one Boston Marathon was that wasn't the only one either. I've had 2 marathons. My first marathon I've talked about before. Mm-hmm. Where I didn't drink anything for the entire marathon because I didn't know any better. I was young. I had no idea. And that was rough. That was rough. That was another one that I finished probably that was probably 17 minutes slower.
Really?
Yeah. When you're in the middle of it, how do you deal with suffering? I like to focus on something else when I'm in the middle of something. Also, like, let's say I'm running and, my lungs feel like they're going to explode. Well, then I focus on, how do my legs feel? If my legs hurt, and that seems to be my limiting thing, then I start to think about my cadence and keeping my cadence going. But I'm always trying to change from whatever the most painful thing is to something more manageable. And that seems to help me, I think. I don't know. What do you think? What do you do?
For me, it's the finish line.
Just thinking about the finish line.
This will be over when I get there.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me there. Now, maybe I could change that, and because at that point that day in Albany, I was just focused on, let's just get this over with at this point. But maybe if I could learn to do what you do and put my mind on something else in the moment, maybe I could pull myself out of that. But many times when things go bad, I'm not one of those that can recover from it. Yeah. It's like, I've chalked this up to a bad race, get me to the finish line, and let's do this again some other time. I've never tried to qualify for Boston since then. that's still kind of on my goal one day. But I think I'm going to let my age group catch up to my time is what I'm going to do from here on. But yeah, mine is always kind of defaulted to the finish. And that's not just in running. It's if you're going through something, it's just get me out of this.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you're right. That makes it hard. But I can only recall one race where things were going south, and I adjusted and got back on and still had a decent race. And that was another Boston race, where I realized probably 15K in that I wasn't going to reach my goal. And so I backed off early before it got bad, and it made all the difference. And I was able to run, a time that I think I was trying to run under 2:45, and I wound up running at 2:48. I mean, I wasn't that far off. So, yeah. When you think about that's from a running standpoint. What about personal suffering? It's a whole different story, isn't it? Because very often for me, I want to feel sorry for myself. I want to lash out, or I just want to give up. There's always a severe reaction for me.
I think I can redirect much better when it's personal.
Yeah.
I think for me it's easier to do more so than physical. Physical, it's just get me out of this.
Yeah.
But personal, many times you can't do that. You can't just. I mean, you can, but personal, you got to figure out a way to redirect, refocus, put your mind on something else. If it's one of those sleepless nights and you can get up.
Yeah.
Go think about and journal and write down or do whatever you got to do. Because I've had those sleepless nights. I think we've talked about that on here before. My default is always I'll just get up. If it's 2:00 in the morning, it's just going to be a long day that day because I have to channel that.
Yeah.
It's not just get me through it. It's what are we going to do about this?
Yeah. That's interesting. I know that when I feel like I'm going through for lack of a better term, suffering, as he asked the question here, one thing that I feel like I am good at is once you go through that short period of time that it lasts, I can forget it. I can be past it and done with it. A lot of people let that really they let it cause more suffering later on because they dwell on it. And that's something that's not a problem that I have. I don't typically
I think that's
dwell
the
on
action
things.
in us that we like to take decisive action and get past it.
Yeah. How can you make your reaction to suffering more Christ-like?
I think
that's the big question.
Thinking about Christ. It's the WWJD bracelets. What would Jesus do? It's constantly having that question in your mind. How can I be more Christ-like in this situation? And the only way that you can keep that question in the forefront of your mind all the time is to be in daily conversation with God, to be in daily reading His Word and praying and talking to Him. If you're doing that, then He's always in your mind, and it's easy to ask yourself that question. But you let a few days go by. It's just, it's a relationship.
Yeah.
You let a few days go by and not talk to your best friend, then that best friend, that relationship's going to get strained, and you're not thinking about that person as much.
Yep.
And we've got to put our relationship with Christ in that context, that it's a daily thing. It's an hourly thing that you've got to maintain.
Yeah, I think about it from the context of, if I go through something tough, Debbie's always there with me, and she goes through it with me. She's not necessarily going through the same thing, but she feels it, and she's supportive, and that's kind of the way it is with Christ.
Sure.
Now, I live in the house with Debbie, so she's always there, and so she is there when I need some kind of emotional support or whatever. Well, the same thing goes for God.
Sure.
And if you're living in the same house as God, in other words, He's close to you all the time, then you get that support.
Sure.
Do you struggle with motivation to exercise? Are you looking for something that will challenge you and inspire and motivate you? The Run for God Run Club is just what you need to get off the couch and on your way to a fitter, healthier you. Stop trying to get into better shape and do it. With the help and inspiration of thousands of others who are going through the same challenges you face. Whether you're participating in the Couch to Marathon Challenge or just looking for a daily pick-me-up to get active, join the Run for God Run Club today. You can join for as little as 27 cents a day. So what are you waiting for? Get started today at www.runforgod.com. We're back, and I read this post, and this is what it said. It said, I've heard people say a runner with long legs has an advantage. However, here are the heights of the greats. Gabriel Selassie was 5'5", Bekele 5'5", Cheptegei 5'6", and Kipchoge 5'6".
I would have thought Kipchoge was taller than that. I guess it's just pictures you see.
Yeah.
Usually he's never running with anybody, so
yeah.
You really judge it. But I would have assumed he was like 6 foot.
There are very, very few distance runners who are 6 feet tall or taller.
Yeah.
And, Usain Bolt broke our perception of sprinters, but sprinters most of the time are relatively, usually they're around average. They're 5'10". They're in that 5'10" to 6 feet, I think, is kind of the sweet spot typically for a sprinter. And of course, Usain Bolt was 6'5", so he looked odd and changed our perception. But in general, I hear this all the time. I hear people say, "Well, with those legs, he ought to be able to run fast." And the truth is that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've never really thought that.
Now, there's a little bit of a truth to the ratio. If your legs are longer in proportion to your body, and for a lot of these greats, that's one thing they did have. Not all of them. Kipchoge's kind of normal, but Gabriel Selassie was one of those guys who had kind of short body, and longer legs, and so sometimes that's the case. But long legs don't help you because it takes more work to move a longer leg. And so it's not an advantage. Now you get a longer stride, so that it's a trade-off, but by and large. Now, there is one thing that all these guys have in common, and that is that they're all very light. And so the one thing that all elite runners have is that they're efficiently built from a weight standpoint. And so if you want to get faster, it doesn't matter how short your legs are, then weight is a way to do that. I've gotten a little bit better over the last couple of years because of my plant-based diet, but a good portion of that is because I'm about 10 pounds lighter than I was when I wasn't on a plant-based diet, and I think that makes I'm leaner.
Yeah.
And so I'm not carrying around extra weight. I mean, think about the idea of carrying a bowling ball with you while you're running.
Reverse engineer it, yeah.
Yeah. And that would make it hard. So again, we're not advocating that everybody needs to lose a bunch of weight and be as skinny as you can be. And not saying that at all. You want to be careful. You want to make sure you get enough fuel in your body. That's very, very important. But that is something that makes a difference. And I just wanted to dispel this thing because there are some people who think the longer your legs, the faster you run, and it's just simply not true. So. All right, it's a time for Dean's Thoughts, and that's a time when I share something that I've written about the intersection between running and faith. Are you bothered by gnats?
Yes.
Here's what happened to me when I lived in places with lots of gnats. This one's called Below the Gnat Line. I spent 7 years in South Georgia in a town called Tai. If you've ever been to South Georgia in the summer, you know that it is below the gnat line. If you've never heard that phrase before, the gnat line is an imaginary line across middle Georgia where locations south of the line are blessed with millions of extra creatures known as gnats. Constantly flying around your face, gnats are among the peskiest creatures on the face of the earth. If that weren't bad enough, I spent 5 years in South Florida where, I would argue, the gnats are even worse. In any case, I lived 12 years of my life in areas with a heavy gnat population. Occasionally, we'll get an influx of gnats here in North Georgia. When the gnats are bad where I live now, most people are highly agitated by the little bugs, but I don't even notice. Why? Because I grew used to them when I lived further south. They don't bother me. It's not that they leave me alone. Quite the contrary. They seem to fly around my face more than others because I'm not constantly waving them away from my face. They're really not that bad once you get used to them. And that's exactly what we do with our running. There's a point in time when we simply stop reacting to gnats because we know it's going to do very little good to swat at them. In the same way, once we get enough consistent running miles under our belt, the uncomfortable feeling is much easier to tolerate. Oh, it's still there, just like those gnats, but it's much easier to run through it. At some point, our bodies just accept that running is not as uncomfortable as we think it is. That's why it's so important to be consistent. At the beginning of each change of season, it takes time to adjust to the warmer or colder weather because we're not used to it. If you alternate running for a week and then taking a week off, you never give your body a steady enough dose to quickly adapt to the change. It will take you far longer to adjust. If, on the other hand, you force yourself onto the running trail, you will find that you will adapt at a much shorter time frame. Living a Christian lifestyle can be tough in a world where everything non-Christian seems to be encouraged. We're constantly bombarded with temptations to do and say things we shouldn't. So how do we get ourselves to the point where turning down those temptations is easier? Well, it turns out that it's a lot like the gnat issue. If we're always focused on Jesus, it makes it much easier to turn away from those temptations. The more often we're successful in turning away from them, the easier it is to do it. The Bible says in Proverbs 1:10, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent." It's as simple as that. And if you follow that advice consistently, eventually you can live your life with those pesky gnats flying all around your face and you barely notice that they're there. A word of caution, though. Just as we can get used to turning away from sin, we can get used to participating in it. That's why it's so important to focus on Christ every day. He will guide you away from those things, and before you know it, you may not even notice that you're tempted, just as I barely notice the gnats these days. And if you'll get out the door regularly to run, it will become second nature. If you're one of those people who do not understand the words easy run, you can get there. Being consistent will do it.
It's a great story, Dean. Sometimes I wonder where the gnat line really is, though, because sometimes I think it's above us here.
Yeah, we do get some gnats here occasionally, but they're never as bad as they are in South Georgia.
Are gnats... Do you have gnats in other places? I'm trying to think. I mean, you go up to the north and out west. Are there gnats?
Yeah, I think there are. They're just not as many.
Because, I mean, here in the summertime, you can go for a 3-mile run. And especially like sometimes in the summer you take your shirt off. It'll just be, you look down and it's almost disgusting. It's like the windshield of a car.
Yep, it's true.
And you're not running that fast.
Yeah.
But they'll just be stuck to you all over you.
That's true.
And it's
Yeah, gnats are bad. And I guess another term we could use for this is to normalize. Mm-hmm. You know, that when you get to the point where the gnats are around your face all the time and it becomes just normal, you kind of normalize that and it just doesn't become a big deal. And that's what we're trying to do when we run, and we run every day. We're trying to get our bodies to a state where it feels normal to run. And then, of course, it becomes easier when you do that. So I think about it from my analogy here is when driving a manual transmission car. Right? When you're driving a manual transmission car, you're literally doing 4 different things with all 4 limbs, right? All at the same time. And you don't even give it a second thought because you've gotten used to it and you do it every day. And it's very simple to do 4 different things with 4 limbs. But I think about the old, rubbing your belly in a circle and patting the top of your head.
You're doing a pretty good job of that right now.
And how hard that is for people to do.
Yeah.
That's a pretty simple thing, but it's hard to do. Why is it hard to do? Well, because we're just trying to do it.
Yeah.
but if we did it every day, it would be easy for us to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're trying to get to with our running. But also, again, as I was talking about in this story, it's also how we want to get to with our relationship with Christ. Is where it's the normal thing for us to spend time with Him all the time. So,
yeah, and you make a point in there where you throw the warning out that it's easy to go the other way as well. I don't know why I had this on my heart yesterday. Well, I know why, because I've got some friends who, and I think we all have these people that these were people that were very active in my church, and it's a whole family, and COVID hit, and of course we all kind of went home and did the online thing and whatever. And when we started coming back, this family didn't come back. And of course I'm friends with them on social media, and this is not meant to be judgmental in any way. It's a wake up call to us all how slippery this slope is. But they didn't come back to church. They're great people, incredible people. But I've noticed slowly over the past 2 years just the things they're doing. Yeah. It's just it's and you know, if you take any one of those things, it's not like it's bad things.
Right.
But it's just not godly things. And we all do those things. We all watch that show we shouldn't have watched, or we all whatever. But when you this goes to my point, this goes to our point that we've talked about so much, is constantly being surrounding yourself with believers, i.e. church, or at least getting plugged into something where you're constantly being edified, because it hurts my heart to see what's happening.
Yeah.
But it's also God really giving me a vivid example of what can happen when we start to make society the norm.
Yeah.
Instead of godly things the norm. When we start to let not running become the norm instead of running become the norm, before we know it, we're going to look up and we hadn't ran in 3 years.
Yep.
But that can also happen in our walk with Christ. Even though you're a child of God, you're saved, you're going to be in heaven. We can strain that relationship so much that sometimes we just don't even hear God anymore. And I'm seeing that. Maybe God's talking to me through this couple, through this family, that, look, because this can happen to any of us.
Sure.
Like I said, this is not casting judgment on them, because we can blink and it happened to us. And I don't know, that this story really brought that to the forefront of my mind this morning, that we got to be diligent. Just as we got to be diligent to stay in the race of running our walk with Christ. It's not we get saved and we're done.
Right.
Just like we don't run one race and we're a runner forever.
Yeah.
You know, you can be a runner in name only a lot of times.
That's right.
And so I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point and a good illustration of what we're talking about. I think about a different illustration for myself on the positive side of things is I'm way better in traffic than I used to be. Well, why am I better in traffic than I used to be? Well, because I've spent more and more time in traffic over the years in those frustrating situations that used to really get my blood boiling. And I've learned to just kind of relax through those things. And I've done it very purposefully because I realized what I was doing and how silly it was. And so I've very purposefully worked on that, and I've gotten much better at it.
But every now and then the old Dean pops up in traffic.
For sure.
It did with me yesterday.
For sure. Yeah. Everyone.
Some people just don't know how to drive, right?
I'm telling you, I don't understand it.
At Run for God, we care about more than just your exercise. We care about your relationship with God, and we believe that the music you listen to while you run can help you build your relationship with God. That's why we partner with J Radio. J Radio offers a variety of positive and Christian playlists to listen to while you run. You can find a playlist that I put together on the Run for God station at J Radio.
Every week, I share a reason why running is so awesome, and this is the reason for this week. It makes it easier to give Christmas gifts, right? If you're looking for a Christmas gift for a runner, it's simple. Just find out what running store they like to shop at, buy a gift card, or find out what kind of shoes they wear. We all can use a new pair of shoes, right?
Sure.
And we would all appreciate that if somebody.
I need a new pair now.
Yeah, if somebody went out and bought me a new pair of Saucony Freedoms right now, I'd be like, man, that's awesome. So,
yeah.
And I just stick them in my closet, wait till the ones I'm wearing wear out.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it's a pair of running shorts, some running leggings for the ladies, some Run for God gear. Really good idea for folks. But maybe some recovery gear. Maybe I need a new foot roller. I still got to get me a new foot roller. I need a new foot roller.
What happened to your old foot roller?
I let somebody borrow it.
I thought you were going to say you wore it out or something.
No. I let somebody borrow it, and I don't want to.
So go get it back.
Well, I think she's still using it, and so
so she needs to buy a foot roller.
Well, yeah, yeah. So anyway,
I need a new foot roller.
I do need
That's
a new
the first.
Well, let's talk about high mileage versus low mileage and high intensity versus low intensity. When we talk about training, there are high mileage runners, there are low mileage runners. There are people who run with a lot of intensity in their workouts, and some that runs a lot of long, slow miles. What do you think is the right way to do it?
I think everybody is very different when it gets to these kind of conversations. There's not a prescription that works for everyone. Yep. With the 5K challenge, even up to how we do the marathon, for beginners, it's a pretty safe prescription for about anyone. But, you get the emails all the time. You've got somebody that's a little bit more advanced runner, and they want to know how to maybe take their time from a 4-hour to a 3:30. Well, there's a lot more dialogue needs to happen than, oh, here, do this. Yeah. It becomes very individualized. It does at that point.
And there's so many factors that go into determining. One of the things, for example, is I cannot train with the same intensity that I could 30 years ago.
Sure.
Because the body just won't handle it. As you get older, you don't recover as fast.
I'm learning that right now.
Yeah. So the one thing you can't do, typically it's high mileage, low intensity, or low mileage, high intensity. You don't really want to try the high mileage, high intensity.
Sure.
Now, the professionals get by with doing that, but they're professionals.
It's their job.
That's their job. Yeah. And I think one of the things that people don't understand is, like, high mileage is different, I think, than people think it is. For me, high mileage is running 80 miles a week. That's high mileage. For a lot of people, if you're running, let's say you're running 35 miles a week. If you think running 40 or 45 miles a week is high mileage because it's that much higher than what you're doing, it's not. It's not. And I think that's where high mileage means a lot more miles. And again, as you mentioned, everybody's different.
Sure.
And how many constitutes high mileage versus somebody else. I see that with our college girls. Some of them can handle a lot of miles, and some a lot less.
Right.
And so we have to be careful with that. But we've seen some really good examples recently, and I've never seen this before until this is like a new phenomenon. This really super low mileage and high intensity, and having great success with it. But two that I thought about: Natalie Cook, who was the fastest high school runner in the nation last year, and ran 20 miles a week or so, and sometimes less, and was the best high school runner in the country. And then Cade Flatt, who we've talked about on here before, who famously runs 12 miles a week and runs, he's the second fastest high school 800 meter runner ever. But here's what happens. People look at that and they see it and they go, I want to do what they're doing, because they think it's less work.
Sure.
But it's not less work, because I guarantee you, for all of those miles that Natalie Cook is running, she's spending a ton of time doing other things to supplement her running. And so if you think that running high intensity miles and running shorter miles is going to take less time, it's not, because it's going to require you to do lots of other things to supplement that. So I don't know. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little torn there. And I'm looking at this through the eyes of Lane right now. You know, Lane has always been a very low mileage runner and excelled. But
that's because he supplemented those low miles.
He's supplemented, but the interesting thing is, and he's now a collegiate runner, and now both times that he has gone over 65 miles, he's wound up injured. Maybe that's a coincidence. We don't know at this point. He's right now on his way back up to getting back up to that mileage. But the funny thing about this last injury, and it's to your point about when you start to get to those mileages, you really have to start doing even more outside of running, is he can almost point, or he feels like he can point to the day it happened, to the day when that injury, he blames it on he didn't do all the things after the run he should have done. He was in a hurry. It was a longer, harder run, and he was in a hurry. He had some work to do, and he basically got straight in the truck and went, and then was on his feet for the rest of the day. He didn't stretch, didn't do a cool down, didn't do all these things that he knows to do. In this latest injury, he really points to one day.
Wow.
So yeah, you know, we've always talked about some athletes can handle that higher mileage, some can't. I think the verdict is still out on. Again, I think it just comes down to the person.
I think so too. Here's the bottom line for me: is what do you enjoy doing? Do you enjoy? I enjoy the longer, easy miles. I just enjoy those, and so for me, I think that works best for me because that's what I like doing. And then I have something else that apparently a lot of people don't have. Lane doesn't have it, for example. I can be running nothing but easy miles, and a race comes up, and I can run almost as fast as I could if I were doing really intense training.
Sure.
And a lot of people have a hard time getting into the well that deep when they haven't done it in a while. That's not an issue for me, but that's my personality. Some people are completely the opposite.
Right.
They have to be running a fair amount of good high intensity stuff in order to run a good race because their body needs to experience that before race day. But whatever you like to do is the important thing. And of course, for most of us, you know, if you're trying to BQ like Sam was, you know, you got to get serious about things in order to do that. But for most of us, we just want to have some fun with it, you know, and maybe we do want to get faster. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get faster, but don't take it too seriously.
But there's nothing wrong with not wanting to get faster too.
That's right.
And I think that's one thing that we've tried to rewire our small segment of society, of running society in this run club is, if you don't want to get faster, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to be a slow runner.
That's right.
The stigma in running is that is a somehow bad thing, like you're not goal oriented, and that's so far from the truth. If you want to be a walker, I mean, I've done it for 2 years now. There's nothing wrong with that. We're trying to strip that stigma away from the. We've done it ever since we've been doing what we're doing. We celebrate the person in the back,
amen,
as much as we celebrate the person in the front because they're both doing things that improve their life.
Yeah, and don't feel guilty about it. Yesterday, I was running on the track there in Cohutta, and there was a guy walking there. And we passed, and, you know, we kind of said hello as we passed. And then as I ran by him, he said, you know, I used to run like that when I was 40 pounds lighter. You know, because he feels guilty because he's walking.
Right.
And, of course, I stopped, and I was like, dude, what you're doing is awesome. It's awesome. And he's like, well, you know, the Heart Association says I should be doing 150 minutes a week, and I try to do 250 minutes a week. I'm like, you're doing a great job.
High five, yeah.
Yeah. And, if you're that person that feels like the person that runs by you, you need to say, look, I know I'm not as good as you, but I'm trying. Don't do that. You're doing a great job. Just do what you can do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how about a trivia question for this week? This one's really simple and straightforward. What is the highest marathon in the world? Highest altitude marathon in the world? That's
The highest altitude marathon in the world.
I would say that most people will have to Google this one. If somebody knows this off the top of their head, I'll be impressed. If you know this off the top
So
of
it's
your
not
head,
one of the normal altitude cities you think of, training cities.
I wouldn't have guessed it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So if you know the answer to that, you can send it to dean@runforgod.com, and if you're the first person to send it, it's $20 worth of merchandise, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So be the first person to send me the answer to that. What is the highest marathon in the world? All right. Well, let us leave you with this motivational thought of the week. The struggle you're in today is developing the strength you need for tomorrow. Isn't that good? Robert
Kind of goes along with everything we talked about today.
Yep. Robert Tu is an author. He's the guy who said that. And I really like that. And we're stronger because of what we've been through.
Sure.
And so when we have trials, just like James says, we should embrace them because they're making us stronger. Just like you said, one of the reasons you like to run outdoors is because you like the additional things it does for you. Yeah, we should embrace that for sure. All right. Go out there and share our podcast. Share this with other people.
Rate the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't say that enough on here, but
Yeah.
that really helps the algorithms or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And think about the Couch to Marathon next year, January 2023. The date is escaping me off the top of my head right now, but if you go to runforgod.com, it's on the banner. Give us some thought. Run it, walk it. One thing that we do for the marathons, just like the Big Beach Marathon, we've talked to the race director and we got an extra hour for our walkers. So you got 8 hours to do that. The marathon that we're talking to right now, we're doing the same thing. It's walking a marathon, man. To me, it's just as big of an accomplishment as running a marathon. I would say the one I did was harder than running.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier in one sense, but it's harder in another sense. It's just two different races. That's really the best way to explain it. You can't compare them. So think about it. Pray about it. You've got another couple of months to figure it out, get a game plan. Just jump off the hot dive with us.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see you there. Know that we love you. Now may God bless every step of every run. Go out there and shine your light.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.